and welcome to the Convex Conversation with me, broadcaster Helen Fospero. Imagine sitting at your desk at school and being transported 3,000 miles to the wintry wilds of Svalbard to join scientists trawling for microplastics in icy Arctic waters, or heading deep down to the ocean floor in a submarine to discover how the weird and wonderful invertebrates who live in the mud play a vital role in carbon storage. Picture being in your classroom chatting to peers in Gaza or Syria to share experiences, talk about the importance of education, the challenges they face, and discover shared passions like music. Or swapping notes with students around the world to learn more about their countries, cultures, and ways of life. Today, I'm with ocean advocate and former South East London teacher, Jamie Buchanan-Dunlop, who's making all of that happen and more through Encounter Edu. Jamie's award-winning platform took off in the Arctic during the Catlin Arctic Survey behind the UK research station in Svalbard. It produces free live lessons for schools on some of our most pressing global issues like climate change, ocean health, the refugee crisis and AI. Jamie and the team are bringing science to life by broadcasting live from expeditions direct to classrooms, sparking curiosity, inspiring students and triggering engagement. Here's a clip of Jamie from the Arctic talking to 8 and 9-year-old third graders in New York.
I think it's very, very difficult to organise a school outing to the Arctic. So I think the next best thing that we can do is trying to bring the Arctic to you. Max, can you do me a favour?
Yeah.
Can you just make sure that no polar bears come up behind me? Is that a deal?
Okay.
Jamie, those third graders were so excited by their virtual field trip to the Arctic. Tell me more about that particular expedition and what you were trying to get across to those young, enthusiastic minds.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, we were based up in Svalbard at the UK Arctic Research Station in Ny-Ålesund. This was a program called Arctic Live, and very fortunately, you mentioned in your introduction, I'd been part of the Catlin Arctic Survey, this amazing expedition to find out how the Arctic is changing. But for a third grader in New York, the Arctic is very far away. And so we set up this program to bring it to them directly. And this was early days, I think, we spoke to this class. We were doing Skypes, one-to-one Skypes with as many classrooms around the world as possible. I think we were doing 13, 14 a day.
Wow, that's a lot.
And it was just a chance for a young person to see the Arctic and to talk to somebody who was there and just ask questions. I've been asked a lot about, have you seen a polar bear? How do you go to the loo at -40? Obviously important things, but you do get the opportunity to share some of the beauty and also the fragility of this amazing place.
I like the way you brought a bit of humour in, because at the beginning you said to them, keep an eye out for polar bears as we're doing this live. The questions, well, it just must be great for young kids to be able to ask whatever they like. And then I guess the challenge is to bring the science to a level that they can understand when you're trying to show the fragility.
Completely. We've worked with amazing scientists up in the Arctic, and I feel like I've already had a pretty quick master's or even doctorate in marine science, having to try and understand it. But it's very, very easy because the scientists I work with are amazingly passionate about their work. And so we get it down to a level which a third grader can understand. And I think the basis is, this is beautiful, it's important. There are these amazing human beings who work at -40 to try and understand how it's changing. Let's meet them. Then very simply think about how you can protect this environment in your own school. And also think about becoming a scientist, because they're awesome.
They are awesome. I've met, through the Convex Conversation, many scientists, including marine biologist Dr. Kerry Lewis, who I think we're both a massive fan of. And thank you, Kerry, if you're listening, for recommending Jamie for the podcast. I think what's incredible about them, they go through hell on earth to do their research, and in crazy conditions in the Arctic, -40 you've mentioned, and howling winds. And they're super clever, but they also have the absolute ability to bring that science to a level where not just young children can understand, but people like me who didn't do particularly well at science. And what you're doing is bringing it to life, trying to learn about the Arctic from a normal textbook is nowhere near as powerful, is it, or as impactful as to actually take those children virtually to where you are.
And this is basically, you've hit on the idea behind Encounter Edu. In the perfect world, we would take every third grade class on a trip to a rainforest, up to the Arctic, to a coral reef, to meet people from other cultures, to understand them. And luckily, we were setting this up at a point where a few technologies were coming on stream. Video calling was becoming a thing. Satellite internet was becoming a thing. And social media, I think in the late noughties, was happening. So this idea of being able to have a virtual field trip and have that $1 million education in a ordinary primary school, whether it's Southeast London, whether it's New York, became a reality. And that's really been the driving ethos behind Encounter Edu ever since.
And how did you come up with the idea for this? Because you were a teacher, I think in your words, in a dilapidated classroom in Southeast London before all this happened.
The radiator was falling off the wall. So I taught a range of humanities subjects, and you get frustrated because however you try and teach these subjects that you've mentioned, it doesn't get through. And you can go, why aren't my students understanding this? Or you can go, why isn't my teaching good enough to make this happen, to get through? And I realized that a lot of my understanding, I've been very fortunate to go on expeditions during and after university, had come from this direct encounter. So I think it was 2006, we persuaded a satellite communications company, the Royal Geographical Society, to give us some money. And we took a school trip to Morocco, like an ordinary geography secondary school field trip. But we did live lessons back to the rest of the school from the trip, really just proving that this was possible. And then everything else is really cascaded from that.
Do you think now it's time maybe for the whole curriculum to be revamped? Because we are living in a digital age. We're living in an age now where we're embracing AI. And yet the lessons that my 16-year-old who's just battled through his GCSEs, poor thing, his lessons are very similar to mine. And mine were, well, a long time ago, 4 decades ago, or more probably. So is it time to perhaps look at the curriculum and think, how can we actually bring it to life and take advantage of the technology that's out there now?
Completely. I think there's two really interesting things about the curriculum, and it's currently under review in England, and one of which is content. And the subject content is important in one sense because it allows you to master something. It allows you to master science or history. And then you have to look at whether that is a valid set of skills and knowledge that help you to succeed in the 21st century. We'll come on to AI later. But the second thing is context. And I think when I look at government papers coming through on curriculum review and education review, content gets mentioned maybe 5-10 times as much as context. But it does place a big burden on individual teachers because the context of your classroom is going to be different around the country. But whether it is the crisis in the Middle East, whether it's the climate crisis, trying to create a curriculum that then brings all these 19th century university department silos to bear on addressing that, I think that's a crucial step that we're missing at the moment.
I think we're missing it too. And I must say, Jack's lessons, one thing I was very impressed with, in his French oral, his chosen topic, and it was there to be selected, was climate change. So I was quite impressed with that because that shows that the curriculum and the lesson content has changed to reflect what's going on in our daily lives. But his geography hasn't, and he'd learnt lots about river sediment and all sorts of things. But the missing piece for me was what's going on in our world with our planet, and that seemed a very obvious place for that. But the content wasn't there, which was a shame, I thought.
It is a shame, and it's not necessarily that river sediment isn't important. The Convex Seascape Survey, which is the program that we're working on at the moment, sediment stores carbon, comes into the ocean, deposits it on the continental shelf and elsewhere, and provides a nature-based solution to climate change. It is that context, is how do you look at all these important physical processes, and it's difficult to say, well, this one's more important than that one. But how does understanding that help to make decisions around our changing planet, around how nature and Earth systems can work on our behalf rather than against us?
It's very exciting what you're doing, I think. And there is a small part of the Arctic, which is, I love this, 3 meters by 3 meters that you call your own, Jamie. Take us there. Describe what that's like and how that little square of the Arctic really has been home to a lot of what you're doing.
Okay, so for those listening, you have to picture a globe. You have to picture the top of Norway and the North Pole. And between those two places, there's this wonderful island called Svalbard, Spitsbergen for some. And you fly into the main town, the bustling metropolis of Longyearbyen with 3,000 people. And then you take a tiny plane up over these gorgeous peaks to an international science settlement at Ny-Ålesund. You land in this tiny old coal mining settlement and then get on the minibus. And then there's all these different buildings for different countries dotted around. There's a central mess hall, canteen, some labs, and then French, German, Norwegian stations, of course, and then the UK station. And it was run for many, many years by the wonderful Nick Cox. And he was really the godfather of Arctic Live. And I would go out the back and to have this wonderful view of down the fjord, these amazing peaks at the end. And it's where I've sat, God knows how many hours I've sat there and talked to, I think, nigh on 150,000 children around the world, just to give them the sense of this amazing place. And the great thing is that because we're just outside of the station, there's scientists in there who can be pulled in, there's other bits and pieces, all the kit you need to go out and be safe. And I've spent so much time there. It's just the most wonderful view and wonderful place in the world. And I wish everyone could see it.
I wish everyone could see it too. And I think you've spoken to children in more than 54 countries from that spot. So it hasn't just been children in the UK, has it, Jamie, that you've taken there?
No, we were big in Lagos for a number of years. I don't know why.
That's great to be big in Lagos.
But no, it's been an absolute delight. And the wonders of technology is that you can reach, time zone permitting, anybody in the world. And we've spoken all the way from Beijing to California.
That's fantastic.
24-hour daylight is a plus for doing that.
Not great for sleep,
Not
presumably.
great for sleep.
And what is it about the Arctic that's really captured your imagination? I read a beautiful article that you wrote some time ago, and in fact I felt compelled to write to you yesterday to tell you that it was truly one of the most beautiful articles, and your descriptions were magnificent. But the cold, the light, it's a magical place, isn't it?
It is magic. I remember before the first time I went up, I'd done a project in Antarctica or South Shetland Islands, and I was going up to the Catlin Arctic Survey, the ice base situated on the sea ice, and Simon Garrett was managing the base, and I went up to see him in the lakes and said, well, how cold is cold? And I was there and it's 5 degrees and damp, and I was absolutely freezing. I thought, minus 40, I'm just going to collapse. It is so different. It's not twice as cold. It's a very different cold. It feels like it's trying to get you. It's trying to get through and freeze you. And I stepped off the plane onto the ice, and the first thing I think it was Carolyn did was that my nose was freezing, going white and actually freezing rather than metaphorically, and her taking her glove off and just basically rubbing and melting my snotty
frozen icicle snot.
Nose. Yeah, and so that quick
it's a bonding moment.
Yeah, very quick bonding.
Yeah.
But past that, there's a general rule: everything's fine to minus 25. Everything gets twice as hard every 5 degrees lower. And there are pages of my journal from that time which are fairly full of swear words and cold. But it is just magic. I remember there was one day, and I don't know what it was, and some scientists will be able to tell me, but the air froze like clouds of just floating miniature diamonds, which you could walk through. And then as the temperatures change, it creates a lens effect with the different densities of air, and the mountains are far away one morning and close to the other. And of course you have the aurora. I think we were slightly too far north to have good aurora. I've seen it in Svalbard. The first time I saw the aurora, it filled the sky and I cried. It was so wonderfully beautiful. It's a very, very different place.
And the scientists really graft in pretty tough conditions, don't they?
The scientists are absolutely amazing. I know that they would tease me if they were here. They were looking at, I was trying to communicate what they were doing.
You're trying to decipher it.
They were looking at copepods. Copepods are our most abundant form of zooplankton, the tiny animals that live in the ocean. So absolutely crucial for the whole marine food web. If they don't exist, then you don't get bigger animals. And they wanted to understand how they moved or what they did on a 24-hour basis. So there's a sampling hole, there was a tripod, and they winched up and down this sampling net to try and catch these.
Are they tiny? They're tiny.
If you think of the size of an exclamation mark on a normal printed page, they vary. I now know there are more than one species of copepod. I can get quite niche now.
I know that worms go up to 3 meters long, thanks to Dr. Kerry.
But we're doing the 24-hour cycle, and I said, I'll help. And hand winching too hard, electric or motorized winch will break because it's too cold. So we had a bicycle winch. So there's this bicycle on a metal tripod surrounded by a snow wall outside a tent in the middle of the Arctic. And I was cycling on essentially an exercise bike for about 20 minutes, half an hour every hour for 24 hours. And I did slightly go mad towards the end. I was gently hallucinating.
Probably kept you a bit warmer, though.
Yeah, my hands turned into glove puppets, and they had a very long conversation at about 5 a.m.
It sounds just wonderful out there. And how does the changing Arctic environment help us understand what's happening globally? Because it's key, isn't it, for our global situation?
There's two things. First of all, it's a sentinel system. So changes are happening in the Arctic faster than elsewhere. So if we look at changes such as warming, I think Svalbard's about 6 degrees above average warming, and a process called ocean acidification, which is driven by more atmospheric carbon dioxide affecting the acidity of the ocean. That's happening fastest in the Arctic too. So it's this eye into the horribly near future now. And then we feel very far from the Arctic, but it keeps Britain warm. So ocean circulation, the Gulf Stream, is driven by the differing densities of water in the Arctic, rising, falling. And so I think there was, last estimate I remember reading was that localized, the UK could be 8 degrees cooler, in fact, if the pump in the Arctic stopped bringing the Gulf Stream to us. So it's both this early warning system, and our weather and our way of life is intimately connected to the health of the Arctic.
It's funny, isn't it? Such a long way away, and so few people get to see it. So it's wonderful that you're able to bring it into classrooms. And you sent me a few films and videos. Seeing the children's faces was extraordinary and how engaged they were. But also what I thought was really lovely was the reaction from the teachers. You get some wonderful feedback, don't you?
It's so nice to be able to provide something I wish I had, and the way I would have wanted to teach. And we are fully based on helping teachers help their classes. And along with scientists, teachers are absolute heroes. And the more that we can do to support them, the better.
It's so important. I was reading that studies have shown that young people's attitudes towards scientists and science solidify between the ages of 10 and 13. That's young, isn't it? So if we don't reach these children and youngsters now with a positive view of science and respect for the environment, we're going to lose that opportunity, aren't we?
I think that it's so important. People think that careers options and ideas, let's do that around GCSEs and A-level choices. There's another piece of research that shows that I think it's gender ideas around careers start to solidify around the 7 to 8 year old mark. So we do a lot of work with primary and elementary schools, and a lot of those teachers aren't science specialists. So what's been great is working with the science teams, working with the various convex and previously Catlin expeditions, and bringing that mix of awesome scientists, really great science education. It's not fluff, it's good science. And then adventure, because to get that engagement going, I would say whatever you do, whatever you work in, if you do speak to schools, don't just speak to secondary schools, speak to primary schools as well. Get your best, funniest, how do you go to the lure -40-esque story and get that in front of young people.
I do a lot of hosting in the rail industry. No anorak required, you'll be pleased to know. And my favourite panel discussion we do 4 times a year is with apprentices and degree apprentices in all forms of big companies, Network Rail, Siemens, places like that. And every time you talk to them about, did they learn anything at school about how many exciting jobs there are, whether it be in engineering or design or the digital world in rail, none of that happened in the classroom, and they've stumbled upon it for various random reasons. But careers as well, so important to inspire those young minds early on and just really find out what excites each individual. My son's been fascinated by aviation since he was 4, and I think will probably go on to be an air traffic controller. But it was very early on, just through going to a little airfield and eating a bacon butty on a Sunday morning and watch the world going by. So these minds are young and malleable, aren't they? And like little sponges, I think, in primary school.
I think you've just given me my next task to start organising virtual careers fairs for primary schools.
I'll help you with that. I'm passionate about it. And I know somebody who's working in that would be probably a great person for you to meet. But yeah, inspire people and find out what these jobs do. I went to my careers teacher when I was about 14, and I'm from Grimsby. And he said, what would you like to be? So I said, I'd like to be a journalist and a television presenter. And he said to me, people from Grimsby don't become TV presenters. So I carried on and I said, I don't want to be any old TV presenter. I'd like to present Blue Peter. And he said, no. He said, you'll never do that. Many years later, and we know, Jamie, that there's no prize for second in broadcasting. When I auditioned on my trampoline for Blue Peter with Anthea Turner and came second, I thought about my careers teacher and how easy it would have been to just give up my dream of journalism, which I didn't because my father was a journalist. But, we've got to let kids know there are so many exciting roles and jobs out there, whether they're in the STEM subjects or other subjects. And again, I don't think that's something that we touch on enough now. And please, the curriculum is being revamped because it's really time, isn't it?
The time is ripe. We have a lot of amazing initiatives in this country already. There's STEM ambassadors and lots of companies involved in that. But I think that more widely, that there's part of that wider discourse, as you're pointing out, is the careers piece is one, but also that general love of science and understanding, and touching also on media literacy. When you read something in the newspaper, how do you know it's right or it's wrong, and this kind of thing?
And also, it's not all about science and the Arctic. For you, you do a lot of work in other fields as well. We mentioned in the introduction AI and the refugee crisis. Tell me a bit about Encounter Edu's work in other pressing global issues and what you've done, what the most exciting lives you've done have been.
The first project that I did, which was about using the voices of others to inspire a wider school audience. A friend and I were both teachers when the 7/7 bombings happened in London. And both our classes couldn't really make sense of it. They had very diverse views on what the Middle East and Islam was, and couldn't find a good answer from the media. And so we started by taking groups of young people to the Middle East, to Pakistan, and making films every day and sending them back to other classes so they could find out what was happening in these places firsthand from their peers and start to break down some of those. I don't know whether it's media created, but everybody seems to want to create a story maybe where there isn't one. Fast forward a few years, we were then worked with UNRWA, the United Nations body for Palestine refugees in the Near East. And it was during the Syria crisis. So this was 2013, 2014, setting up this project. And we were looking to focus in fact, the international donor community on the importance of education and emergencies in these conflict areas. And so we designed a school linking project to talk about education. And we linked schools, I think it was in Gaza, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon, with schools first in the UK and then other donor countries across Europe and then also in the US. And really to give those young people the opportunity to talk as equals about the importance of education. And what was so nice about it was that it wasn't this, oh, let's look at people who are being affected by conflict. A lot of the UK classes were going, wow, they really value education a lot. Maybe I should change my attitude to how I value school, which was great that the learning was coming in that way. And there was one call which really, and I tend to tear up when I talk about it, was from somewhere in Damascus or the suburbs, where this class in the UK asked, well, what do you need? And this little girl in Damascus goes, we need love.
Oh, you get me going now. How powerful is that?
Yeah.
What was the response when she said that?
Everybody just realized that, I think, and this is a common theme through a lot of the work, is humanity. That yes, there is a lot of transactional structural piece that is important, but that human connection, whether it's to a 14-year-old in Damascus or a scientist at -30, that's what helps us understand our world. It's not through a textbook, it's not through data, it's through these meetings. And the more meetings I think we can get for our young people, the better chance they have of making their own idea about the world and their place in it.
When you're actually there, or your students having conversations with other students, that's when the understanding really comes in. I was lucky enough to go on a conservation trip with Tusk, and we actually recorded 3 podcasts in 3 days in Kenya, which was incredible. I can't tell you how many things we packed into those 3 days. And one of the things was to visit some of the primary schools that Tusk has built out there. People tend to think it's all about saving the animals. It isn't just about saving the animals. It's about making the community and the wildlife all work together. And talking to some of those children, I realised some of them were walking 2.5 hours a day to get to school because there was no dorm or accommodation. And they're walking over the savannah and the plains where lions are and rhino, and our poor son Jack, if we get stuck in a bit of traffic, if I'm giving him a lift to school, he's like, I know, Mum, I know. There are no lions and I'm not in a war-torn country, because I can't help but try and set it in context. So those conversations that you're having with youngsters from those parts of the world, I think are really important, and really important that kids here realise that there's a connection as well. I think pop music came up, didn't it, in one of those conversations? And of course, these kids are normal teenagers.
Yeah, I hadn't fully appreciated how important K-pop was. I'm not an expert. Don't ask me to...
Shall I ask you what your favourite tracks are?
Don't ask me what my favourite tracks are. But it is wonderful that when you have this very, very different classrooms, ostensibly, that these young people find commonality, find a connection. And who knew that K-pop was going to be the connection between, this was a UN school in Gaza and a school in London. It was great because it starts to make it seem, I don't want to use the word normal, but it normalizes the connection so that what's going on is felt more.
And I think so it can open perhaps that, what can we do to help? Yeah. That's really important. And we do have a lot here, don't we, in terms of, I'm just thinking in terms of clothes and books and access to stuff. And if partnerships can be formed between young people in different places around the world, it makes a much better society.
I think there is that. I think in the environmental piece, I'm trying not to put any onus on children doing stuff, on switching off the lights or bicycling to school, but more on advocacy. I think that in a lot of this work, whether it's for development, humanitarian aid, environmental change, young people should be empowered to ask adults. They're not the adults in the room. They shouldn't have this burden put on them. And by the way, you need to collect all your old clothes. And by the way, you need to switch off the lights. And by the way, you need to plan your vegan menu for the next year, month, whatever it is. They should be going, oi, adult, here's all the problems. This is what I know. Why aren't you dealing with this? Here's some ideas about how to make it better. And I think I would love us to wake up to those voices more rather than saying, oh, here's 50 things you can do to make the world better. A lot of those actions are good because they involve young people in the issue, but they shouldn't be viewed as solutions, and that burden shouldn't be put on them.
You're a dad yourself. Do you get inspired by your children?
I do, and they are wonderful. The youngest came up with, I think, something we can all learn from. He said, it's not good, it's not bad, in the middle is perfect.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
The wisdom of a 5-year-old. But
I think we could learn a lot from a 5-year-old.
No, their joy, and they're unsaddled by a lot of the concerns of the world. And so seeing through those eyes is just fantastic.
You're seeing it through really authentic eyes, aren't you? Because they haven't been really influenced too much at that point. What about AI? AI is very much part of our world now, for good and sometimes not for good. But where are you with that? And are you doing live lessons that involve the digital AI space?
We did some wonderful work with a company called Oxbotica, looking at driverless cars, learning about how coding and algorithms and everything works. I think the base computing and the base technologies around it are really important for us to understand. It is a tool that is being used in a lot of amazing ways, many of which you probably read in the papers. Where the big conversation is, of course, is with large language models and things like ChatGPT and their influence. There's two things here. One of which is a great technology. Where can it help us best? And where does it just annoy us intensely, such as
me talking to a bot.
You talking to a bot.
Thinking it was real.
Thinking it was real. And the kind thing to say would be, we've got this amazing new tool. We're not quite sure what to do with it yet. Let's explore that properly. I don't think we necessarily did it very well with social media. I think that we just need to say, okay, we didn't do it that well in the past. There's lots of good things about social media. There's lots of negative things about social media. We didn't manage that terribly well. Let's not make that mistake next time round.
And what projects are you working on at the minute that are exciting you? What can we expect in classrooms coming soon?
Mud,
yes. We know all about mud. I know a lot about mud, thanks to Kerry.
We're working with the Convex Seascape Survey and looking at the carbon stored in mud. What's super interesting for me in a classroom and education context is it adds what's called a nature-based solution to climate change, and not just this decarbonisation chat we have about it the whole time. And for those of you who have seen the Ocean film from David Attenborough, it really shows the capacity of the planet to heal itself and then to help us. And so we've focused a lot on taking that message into schools, how if we work properly with nature, nature can help us tackle these big problems such as climate change. So that's a big piece, and I'm, fingers crossed, have a couple of projects, if funded, will get us back up to the Arctic.
Oh, that'll be smashing. If you need an assistant or anybody to carry your bags, or you feel we need to do a live conversation, or you need a former TV presenter, lots of things, give me a shout there. And I mean that. You're an advocate for the ocean, and it's very much in the news at the moment. Obviously, Lord Attenborough turning 99, this wonderful film that's come out. Prince William, I think, is always a wonderful advocate for the ocean. It seems like it's finally getting the recognition and the attention that it needs for its role in the health of the planet, because I don't feel it's perhaps been understood by the masses in more recent times.
And it's a really difficult thing to understand.
It is.
You can look at a satellite or space picture of the planet, and it's a blue planet, and it's 70% of the surface is covered by ocean, and all these facts. But we're a terrestrial animal, and the ocean, it's very difficult to explore. apart from rock pooling or swimming or playing on top of the ocean, some people are lucky enough to go scuba diving and seeing the wonder or snorkel. Very few people have been in submersibles or gone down to the depths of the ocean. But if you do, it is bonkersly wonderful.
I'm guessing you're a scuba diver, are you?
Not no, my ears or sinuses or something doesn't work properly. I've been plonked over the side with a
snorkel mask on.
Yes, basically. But whether you're on the west coast of Scotland or on the Great Barrier Reef or wherever you are, it is just heaving with life. And if you want to get a sense of abundance in nature, yes, you can go and see some of the great migrations in Africa if you're lucky enough. But one of the things you can do is just to get your head under the water, because it's another world. It's our world on our planet. It's amazing. And if we treat it well, it can give us so much.
Where did your adventuresome spirit come from in the first place, Jamie?
We had a tiny bothy up in Scotland, which we went to when I was young. And then I think the big change, I got a hit on the head in rugby at school and was confined to concussion bed or whatever it was. Bed rest for a few days, and read 7 Years in Tibet, the wonderful account by Heinrich Harrer. And said, right, I'm going to go to Tibet and I'm going to go and meet the Dalai Lama. And
as you do after a bang on the head in rugby.
Yes. And so after school, that's what I ended up doing, and fell in love with the Himalayas, and then went on several more trips, just long walks by myself or with a local guide. We went off walk for a month or so across different bits of High Asia. And
meeting incredible people, I would have thought, along the way.
Meeting incredible people, very, very difficult to communicate, unless in sign language. There's one wonderful guy that I've had in North Pakistan, in Nayat. He won't be listening, I can tell you that now.
What will he be doing?
He will be guiding people up and down and fixing the Jeep road to his village in Shimshal. He saved my life a couple of times from falling off cliffs and the like. So
Did he?
Yeah.
Did he really save your life?
Yeah. There's a couple of bits where, for me, felt like a lost valley and everything else. There's a 3-day walk up. It's very thin track. And then to get up to the summer pasture, if you ever watch these films where they have the long rope bridges with slats missing and where you have a foot-wide path with a 300-foot drop on one side and 300-foot cliff on going up, the locals happily trot along these things. And I, of course, being a bit of a muppet, didn't happily trot and basically lost my balance and was going over. And he grabbed me.
And saved your life.
Yes.
Amazing. It's incredible what happens on these trips. I remember trekking through Borneo in the jungle, and we'd got all the right gear, the right hiking boots, the right socks, and learned how to deal with ticks and all this kind of thing. And our local tribes people had Crocs on, and they were just running up and down the hills with their Crocs and all our pans and pots on their back and laughing at us all with the right gear on. But not everybody gets the chance to do these adventures, and there are some wonderful charity adventures out there too, aren't there, that you can join and take part in if you want to see the world without the incredible cost sometimes that becomes a barrier to some people.
Yeah, there are those, and I think there's also some great charities like Earthwatch, where you can go and take part in science. Blue Ventures, I don't know whether they're still doing, but they used to do amazing trips to go and help out with science and community-based work. So doing a journey with a purpose is absolutely fantastic, and being able to get a deeper sense of a place, I think, than if you're just travelling through on your own.
Mine have been raising money for Barnardos.
Oh,
so
amazing.
That's been a great thing to do. And I remember a few friends here said, we don't understand how come if you're trekking in Borneo or the Arctic Circle, how does that help? Well, first of all, we all raise sponsorship money, but also then it raises awareness. I wrote a few articles and things like that, and they're not extreme travels like you've been on, but it's fueled my sense of adventure. And now our daughter's in Vietnam at the minute for a few weeks and sending incredible pictures back. And it's like, gosh, I need some more adventures. So my offer to carry your bags if you go to the Arctic, I really meant that. Like, I'm determined to get there one way or t'other. What is out there for you now, Jamie, on a personal front? What would you like to achieve and where would you like to go? Where do you see the business going and where do you see you personally going now, other than taking care of your lovely children?
Really good question. I think there are two things that I'm looking at the moment. The first of all is to start to create structures that really support teachers to properly integrate nature, ocean and climate education, and especially at the primary level. And working with a group a couple of weeks ago, they're saying, it's great that we have World Ocean Day and there's lots of stuff around World Ocean Day and I can join a lesson or whatever, or it's great to have Earth Week. But what's not available is that idea about how this is properly integrated. And integrated is an important word. It's not replacing the great science and great geography and great other learning that's been happening, but there's that theme that can carry through the whole year. And then it's back to the funding calls, because I think that if we could have a constellation of these things happening, if we could have the Arctic, the rainforest, these touch points of our changing world accessible to every young person, then I think we can start to inspire and engage a generation who feel genuine ownership of their planet and can start to connect the local with these big global challenges.
I think you're already inspiring and engaging, and it's been an absolute treat to listen to you. I feel there's maybe things I can help you with. We've met some wonderful characters through the Convex Conversation who travel and do amazing things all over the world. So we'll have a private conversation afterwards, but it's good to hear what you've been up to. And I wish my children had had the benefit of some of your fantastic virtual lessons. Perhaps Jack will in the future. You've done an incredible job, so well done with it. And Kerry was right. She said you're the most intelligent person she's ever met. And I'll give you that award too.
Thank you, Kerry. Learning about the ocean and science and the dedication of scientists through Kerry and colleagues has been one of the great privileges of this, something I'd never expected. And to discover that passion, and when you see the headlines about our changing world in the newspaper or on a website or on the news, there are amazing individuals who are making that happen and who are helping. And the more we can focus on those helpers, the more positive we can direct not only ourselves, but inspire our young people too.
That was like ending on an Oscar-winning speech that you hadn't had time to prepare. So well done. Thank you so much, Jamie. You've been listening to Jamie Buchanan-Dunlop, an ocean advocate and former teacher and founder of Encounter Edu. If you're a teacher or involved in education, a headmaster, headmistress, you want to find out more about Encounter Edu, then just go to their website. Download and subscribe to our series at convex.podbean.com or search The Convex Conversation on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to yours. I'll be back next week with another thought-provoking guest. See you then.